Welcome to the video for growth lesson 4. This is the sacramental life lesson. So we're going to be talking a lot about the sacraments and how the sacraments can be a regular part of our participants' daily lives. And we're going to particularly focus on the two sacraments they can receive on a regular basis, the sacrament of confession and the sacrament of the Eucharist. This lesson has a lot of teaching involved with it. For some of your participants, this might already be a regular reality for them, that they are already attending Mass on a regular basis, receiving the sacrament of confession on a regular basis. But for others, and in many cases, many of the participants, this might be something that's just not part of their daily lives yet. And for some, this might actually be the first time they've talked about a sacrament, especially if we have non-Catholics in our groups. They may never actually have spoken about the sacraments in such an in-depth way as we're going to do in this lesson. Or for some, the last time they talked about this was at their confirmation prep or something a long time ago. The key here is to make this not just about learning. Again, as we've been saying over and over again throughout this study, we want the practicals to be spirit-filled. We want them to be learning how to use the sacramental life to be able to build their relationship with God and to put the sacraments in that context. And in addition to being able to teach then and for them to be able to learn, we need to be ready to share out of our own experiences so that they can hear about experiences of people who are living a dynamic sacramental life and that it is drawing us into a deeper relationship with God. So we want to make the sacraments normal and accessible to them through this lesson, and to be able to put it in that proper framework of a relationship with God. It'll be good as well as you're preparing to take some time to go through the leader's notes that refer you to the catechism, just to make sure we have a solid grounding on how the church speaks, particularly about the sacraments of reconciliation and the Eucharist.
There's some really great vocabulary and teachings in the leader's notes on page 88 and before, because we're not all naturally versed at articulating that. Maybe we haven't even really read the catechism ourselves as leaders. So you'll see more and more throughout the Growth Leader Guide and all of our leader guides that we refer back so that you can go and understand the context and be formed yourself.
So let's talk, though, about the intentional accompaniment side of this. You've got lots of leader notes to guide you through a lot of the particulars, but how are we going to accompany our people through this lesson?
So I will kind of begin in the end. This lesson ends with a challenge for participants to attend Mass weekly, Sunday Mass, and try attending a weekday Mass, and try to go to the sacrament of reconciliation. So those might be all really easy, like Michael said, for one or two of our participants, but they might be a huge challenge for a lot of our participants. And we want to be aware that we're headed into that challenge and accompany them through that. So you want to come prepared, knowing about the different Mass times in the neighborhood close to where you're leading your study. You want to be prepared to have room in your calendar, like that this isn't the week that you have all kinds of other social things happening, and that you're making space, if you can, to go with them to these, to go with them to confession, to go with them to daily Mass, or to invite them over after Sunday Mass for breakfast. So there's really some prescribed intentional accompaniment, if I might put it that way, happening. So just as a leader, be ready. Look at your calendar, make a plan. The other dimension of intentional accompaniment here is the listening that we're doing, right? The prophetic listening that we're doing, especially as they come back and share about last week's challenge, which you're probably in the routine of by now. How did last week's challenge go? We know that we've been asking them to pray daily. We've been asking them to use the scriptures in prayer. So we're listening. We're listening to how they share about prayer. We're listening to insights that they're having in prayer about scripture, about their life. And we're going to celebrate. We're going to make a really big deal of those things and say, that's awesome. That's so great. And for those that are quieter, that's also okay. There's no comparison. We try to diffuse that because we're just trying to celebrate what we see God doing in their life and the ways that they're growing, and really be the one to celebrate all of those progressions.
And we can see the fellowship then growing as well, as the more they're hopefully at this point, we're starting to see them being a little more free in their sharing about how things have gone since the last lesson and how the challenges are going, which will give you a good indication of, is this group connecting together, and are they feeling that comfort to be able to speak on the level of fellowship and intimacy?
Exactly. If one of our peers has been sharing repeatedly that they find prayer so mechanical, and then one week they come back and it was awesome and fluid, like hopefully all the group members, right, that we're celebrating that victory together. It's not just the leader celebrating the individual, but there's, like, you're right, like a shared excitement and celebration. Michael mentioned earlier in his notes that we want you to be prepared of your own personal experience with confession, and at Mass, of the ways that God has moved in your heart and spoken to you and you felt ministered to. So spend some time reflecting. Maybe you even want to try to attend a weekday Mass yourself, leading as you lead growth and as you prepare for this lesson to sort of live what we're about to challenge our participants to do.
And this might be the first time that our participants hear someone sharing passionately about their experience of the sacraments.
It's true.
And that can be a really important witness for them to be able to see that, for many people, going to Mass might seem like a mechanical thing that they just do. But we want to bring them to a point where they're saying this is actually a place of joy, a place of encounter, a place of intimacy. So the more you can speak about the Mass, the more you can speak about your experiences in confession that way, you might be telling them something they've actually never heard before, and opening a whole new perspective on how they can encounter the sacraments.
That's right. And as we go through the study, there will be some tougher questions that can emerge because, like you mentioned, some of our participants may not be attending Mass, Sunday Mass regularly, and they might not even understand why or what that would look like. Some of our participants have not been to confession in a long time. They're coming from a lot of some of them might not even be Catholic. So with that lay of the land going on in our small group, we can anticipate that there might be some tougher conversations. So Michael, one of the tougher conversations you and I have seen as leaders, and we know our leaders' faces. How do you minister to someone in the group who doesn't really understand and doesn't attend Sunday Mass regularly?
This is a really important one because it's almost guaranteed it's going to come up in your groups. And so it's important to have a balance of both compassion and truthfulness, and being able to be firm in the truth. If anything, I would err on the side of compassion to make sure that people feel comfortable, that they don't feel condemned or judged as they go through this study. We don't want, when somebody says, I don't attend Sunday Mass, for them to walk out of that conversation feeling terrible about themselves, or feeling terrible about this group. We want them to feel loved, cared for, but that we've also informed them of the truth, because we don't want to shy away from that either. So it is an important balance we're trying to walk here. As you're trying to navigate this conversation, really be attentive to the person. Be attentive to what they're talking about. Ask them about, well, maybe why aren't you attending Sunday Mass? What are some of the things that are holding you back from doing that? Hear them out. Let them talk about that. And it also might come to the point where you have to inform them that actually going to Sunday Mass is not just a suggestion. It's actually a requirement of our faith. And to be able to even speak about the idea of mortal sin, but again, in the context of compassion, and to know as well that as leaders, it's not our job to speak to whether or not somebody is in a state of mortal sin. We actually can't do that because we don't know the state of their soul. We don't know if they've actually met all the conditions for mortal sin. We know that there's the grave matter, but we don't know the other two conditions, if they've been met or not, if they had full knowledge and they had full intention to violate that law.
I love that you're pointing that out, because for a lot of our participants, as a leader, you might be the first one informing them that this is a requirement in our faith. We don't know how they've been raised. We don't know what's been modeled to them in their upbringing, and especially if they're not Catholic, that's different. But we might be the very first person saying that that's a mortal sin, and that can do a lot of things internally to someone. They're going to feel, and we want to be pastoral. And I love how you're elaborating on that dimension, because we want to be equipped to say the truth, but we want to realize what that's doing to people on the inside when they're discovering this maybe for the first time.
And there is some great notes as well on page 88 of your leader's guide that talk about what are some of the times when it might actually be permissible to miss Sunday Mass. Those notes we actually went with our theologian who was reviewing this with us, and him and I actually sat down. We went through those notes together. We actually went and referred back to canon law to make sure that we were accurate in this. So you can be confident in those notes. They accurately reflect the church's teaching on times when it may be permissible to miss Sunday Mass. So I really encourage you to go and read those through. So again, just the importance of compassion and truth being kind of a great balance that we're trying to strike here.
And that list isn't necessarily exhaustive, and that we do encourage leaders that you would consult your parish priest just about the situations if you're not sure. Like, we've prepared these notes, but we know that they're not the fullness.
That's right.
Everything.
They just try to anticipate some of the common reasons why, so for instance, if somebody is in caring for the sick, has a sick family member, and you can't actually leave them alone. Maybe it's a young child and you're at home as a single parent and you have a young baby who's sick and you can't take them to Mass, well, that can be an example of a reason why it might be okay to miss Mass. It shouldn't be a regular basis, but that might be for a particular time.
Right.
So examples like that we explain in those leader notes, and I encourage you to make sure you read those through.
How about the situation to help our leaders if someone in their group is not Catholic? What are some pointers how should we be equipped to navigate conversations there?
Which, we hope that you'll have people in your groups that are not Catholics. That's part of what we are, when we are evangelizing, we're trying to encourage people to consider joining the church, which means we might have people in our growth studies for whom the sacraments are not part of their life and never have been, and they've never learned about them. This can be a really great opportunity to introduce them to why we put such an emphasis on the sacramental life, and to engage them in understanding that the sacraments are meant to bring us into a relationship. They're not just a practice for the sake of a practice, but they're actually for the sake of relationship, and that they are the most tangible way for us to meet God. This is where he comes to meet us. These are things they may never have heard before. If they express interest in participating in the sacraments, this can be another great opportunity in your attentional accompaniment of this person to really tailor the way you minister to them individually. So you may, for instance, if they express that they are interested in participating in the sacrament of reconciliation, but they are not Catholic, you might want to encourage them to meet up with a priest. There's no reason they can't sit down with a priest, talk about things, even repent of their sin and pray with a priest. It's not the same as a sacramental absolution, but there's still a lot of value in that. And it can be preparing them for the potential of one day becoming Catholic and actually participating in the sacrament. And same with attending Holy Mass. This is a great opportunity for them to be able to come experience a Mass, to see what it's like for us as Catholics, how much we are encountering the scriptures, how much we're praying together as a community, and to have a great conversation about what the Eucharist really means for us. And so you can have these great opportunities to be able to introduce them to the sacraments, while also, again, being firm in truth and being able to say, well, actually, we can only receive the Eucharist if we are Catholic, if we are truly in communion with the Catholic Church and with the belief of this parish and the belief of the people who are receiving the Eucharist.
Right.
So we, again, are walking this line between compassion and truth.
Right. Now, those are really great tips, to help us navigate those sections. And again, the challenge this week is where we end, and we've already mentioned it a bit in the video, but that you are making a plan with your participants for them to attend Sunday Mass regularly, to try to attend a weekday Mass, and to try to go back to confession. Now, we know you're not superhuman. We don't expect you to do all three of those things with everyone in a given week, but you're making yourself available and looking to see, and the Lord takes care of those details. Like he often arranges that certain people can make certain things, and other things we have to let go, but you're trying your best to make yourself available to join them and to accompany them through these sacraments. So just make room in your calendar if you can.
And one thing I actually forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, but still important, is that, as you can see, there's actually a lot of ground we're trying to cover in this lesson. And so one of the recommendations we've made is that you may want to consider doing this over 2 sessions of your regular meeting times. You don't have to. We've tried to time it out so that you can fit it into one session, but it is a lot of ground to cover, and there can actually be a lot of great conversation that comes out of this. So it is something just to consider for yourself as the leader, if you may want to break this up over 2 weeks or 2 meeting times that you're having, which then might also allow you to break up the challenges.
That's right. Some people this week, some people next week.
That's right. Or like, okay, this week we're going to focus on confession, and next week we're going to go to Mass together. So those are all things you can take into consideration, and we leave to your discernment and as the leader of your particular group. But that brings us to the end of lesson 4 here. So a lot of ground to cover. This is a really great lesson, though, to be able to introduce them to such an important part of our Catholic faith, the sacramental life. We'll look forward to seeing you again for lesson 5.